Two Tigers with a lot of potential are sadly finished with football. Plus, the Kentucky roughing the punter, the snafu last year. Well, the rule has been amended, but not to my satisfaction. And I want to tell you why right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hail, you true sons and daughters. I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And by the way, to lead off, unfortunately, some bad news for Missouri football. Not devastating in terms of for the 2023 season, but definitely not good news for a couple young men. Chance Looper, wide receiver, of course, son of the Missouri running backs coach Curtis Looper, also Xavier Simmons, a really promising linebacker, I believe a former four-star player ranked by some that, well, definitely a guy that you would have hoped would have contributed in the future. But Gerard Hamilton over at Power Mizzou got some information about these two young men. Just yesterday, he said, I got more clarification on, quote, medical scholarship and what it means for linebacker Xavier Simmons and wide receiver Chance Looper. Both of these players are medically disqualified at Missouri. Their education will be paid for, but they're not suiting up for Mizzou again. Now, they could go somewhere else and get cleared by another team, but that doesn't appear to be the case at Mizzou for Simmons and Looper, unfortunately. Well, again, obviously Simmons was a guy who had not seen the field very much. Looper had sparingly as well. Last year, it seemed like Looper was poised to have a breakout season at receiver for Missouri. If you attended the previous spring game like I did, well, he seemed to have a real connection with his quarterbacks out there. It seemed to have slimmed down and changed his body a little bit. I don't know. He just looked slimmer, faster, better, the whole deal, in my opinion. So it was real sad when seemingly an unknown, at least to us as fans, illness of some sort. Certainly he doesn't owe us an explanation. It's his medical privacy here, but it was just a mystery the whole season. It seemed like, okay, is he going to come back? And just for whatever reason, never could be the case. So hopefully Chance Looper is just okay. Number one, Looper and Xavier Simmons, of course, both those guys. I just hope they're okay and everything's all right. And, obviously there's more important things than Mizzou football and what our record might be this year or the year after that. So just hope those guys are okay. Genuine well wishes out to both of those young men, obviously. By the way, one thing I didn't note from media days this past week down in Nashville, there were several reporters who caught screenshots, a presentation of new playing rules for 2023 in SEC football. I suppose just does SEC make its own rules? I thought that was interesting. This has got to be an NCAA thing, right? But regardless, this slideshow officially put up there by the SEC at media days says, hey, remember the Kentucky play last year? Of course you do. The ball snapped over the Kentucky punter's head. Will Norris, well, the punter somehow gets it off quite nicely, by the way. Good job by him. But Norris runs into the guy's leg, hurts him, by the way, unintentionally by Norris. But, he's basically outside of the tackle box, all this stuff. Gets called for the roughing the kicker. I don't need to replay the whole thing for you. If you're a Missouri fan, you're well aware of what happened last season, I am sure. But bottom line is, on this slideshow here, the editorial change to this rule, as it said here, no running into / roughing the kicker fouls if kicker is displaced more than 5 yards from the position at the snap. Well, I like that they've tried to do something here, and certainly that he was displaced, the Kentucky punter, more than 5 yards, which I guess means 6 yards, right? Okay. To me, this is a needlessly elaborately written rule here because, well, you're displaced 5 yards. So that means if you, I don't know, take off and run 4 yards to your right and then kick it, you're still eligible to be roughed up. To me, that's just a little bit needlessly complicated. I think there's a 5 yard window there. Again, a 5 yard circle, I would assume, around the punter there. To me, if the ball hits the ground, then all bets are off. That's how I would have written the rule. For instance, obviously, the ball snapped over the punter's head and it hits the ground. Well, I'm sorry, you're no longer afforded protection. I don't care if you're 4 yards away or 5 yards away or 6 yards away or 15 probably, as the Kentucky punter was last year at least. You know, to me, just make it easier on the officials to decide. I mean, if the punter maybe bobbles the ball, again, it doesn't hit the ground. Okay, let him get a shot to get off a clean punt. Give him his usual protection. Fair enough. But to me, this again, needlessly elaborate here, making it a little bit too complicated on the SEC officials. That's just my opinion. And last time on the program, I talked about how the Faurot Field track, which a lot of Missouri fans had noticed was not the safest thing in the world when you're running with metal football cleats. Suddenly it's a slip and slide out there. Well, those fans have been listened to. The track was covered with a pretty affordable solution there. No digging up the track with giant pieces of machinery or anything like that. No, let's just throw down a little bit of extra artificial turf or carpet, rug type material, whatever the heck it ended up being. It seems like problem solved, and the fans, most importantly, were listened to. And to that point, once again, there's been a large section, a vocal section of Missouri fans that have said for years, hey, all those bright gold seats in Mizzou Arena, well, when they're empty at times, boy, it sure shows up like a sore thumb on television. Well, guess what? After years and years of these complaints, it didn't take Desiree Reed-Francois and her administration to make a change yesterday, and the seats are all now black in Mizzou Arena, apparently. A social media video put out yesterday seemed to confirm that, and it looks pretty good, by the way. Kind of a unique look. I can't think of a ton of college basketball arenas out there that have a true black, all black seats out there. So it's kind of a cool look, to be honest. It ended up working. And well, I do think it will camouflage a little bit when some people are, especially in those early season games, are maybe not showing up or in the club, whatever it might be. So I think this is a good move by the AD, just showing once again that mostly that they listen. They listen to the fans. That's the biggest takeaway for me. And quite frankly, at this point, as a fan, from my perspective, I really can't think of anything I would complain about from Desiree Reed-Francois. And frankly, that's my job, is to complain occasionally and nitpick. So really well done job by her and her administration so far, in my opinion. And coming up, good old Nike has subtly changed up Missouri's home black football uniforms this season. And I, for one, think the change is a positive. So let's have a quick project run play coming up. But first, I want to tell you about eBay Motors, because for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop on eBay Motors, that's just what you're going to get. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After it all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right part and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen every day. And for you everydayers coming up next week, yes, there's no crying in baseball, according to a league of their own, but darn it, there is crying in football. And I loved Larry Smith and Dick Vermeil for it. And I want to explain why coming up next week on the show. But hey, for those of you who are watching on YouTube right now, you're about to get some real added value, my friends. Yes, we're going to talk Project Run Play. And while graphic design is not exactly my forte, I did cook something up for you, for those of you watching on YouTube, so we can get a better visual comparison here. Yes, as I said, Missouri changing up its home black football uniforms for this season to more match what they did last season with their whites and their gold uniforms. I'll show you what I'm talking about here on YouTube as we make the transition away from my face to something even more beautiful, Missouri football players. But you can see on the left here the old Missouri football uniforms, if you will. In retrospect, you compare them to the new ones, and yeah, there's something missing there, right? They seem a little bit plain without the Mizzou above the number, without question. I will agree with that, and definitely these black ones will match much more closely the Mizzou that's on the white and gold uniforms. Once again, those tops. But even more interestingly, the change, I think, to the white font from the gold font on those gold numbers from the old uniforms. I think one reason that Missouri went to white there is because, well, they like to wear white helmets at home fairly regularly with those black tops. And, well, the white uniforms, or excuse me, the white helmets with that white font, it does just match and pop a little bit better. But just in general, I definitely like this change by Nike and Missouri here. The white font, the Mizzou, the big Mizzou. Hey, some people have said the Mizzou's a little bit too big on these uniforms. I don't know. I'm growing to like it, I have to say. The whole thing, it just looks a little bit better. Obviously, the trim along the sides, all that kind of stuff, nothing's changed there whatsoever. So it is somewhat of a subtle change by Missouri, but it's one that I approve. Now, this is the preseason. Obviously, we're getting about a week away from August here. So this is when, to me, assumptions start being made by a lot of college football fans in terms of who's going to win this division, this conference, that conference. Well, in particular, right now, I want to challenge an assumption, not an assumption, but just an assertion that I made earlier in the week, which is that Georgia is in a tier of its own. And, well, I'm not going to challenge that one at this moment, but it's the next one. I said that Tennessee is in a tier of its own just below Georgia, then basically throw Missouri, South Carolina, Kentucky, and Florida into a hat right now at this moment. At least that's how I would look at it. Then Vanderbilt a tier below that. But, well, apparently there were some people at Vanderbilt who are really challenging all of our assumptions when 8 first-place votes for the Commodores came in, yes, to win the Southeastern Conference. Holy moly. Vanderbilt, who's never even played in an SEC championship game, that's quite the leap, isn't it? But I am going to challenge the assumption here that Tennessee is in a tier below Georgia and above Missouri and that whole group of teams I just said all by itself. Because while it does seem like Josh Henson, if I had to assume something, it would be that Josh Henson's really got this Tennessee program rolling. But at the same time, without Hendon Hooker, the Tennessee quarterback last year, Joe Milton in there instead, well, that's a big question mark. Now, listen, there's no more quarterback-friendly system than what Josh Heupel rolls out there. I'm sure Joe Milton's going to put up a lot of stats, but the bottom line is in big-time games that Tennessee needs to win against teams like Georgia or even teams like Missouri, hopefully the Tigers can be more competitive for the first time ever, really, under Eli Drinkwitz against the Volunteers. But regardless, there's just no guarantee that Joe Milton is going to be anywhere near as good as Hendon Hooker was last season. And I think one reason people are assuming not only that Josh Heupel has obviously created a great quarterback-friendly offense, But I think if you watch the bowl game last year after Hooker was injured, Milton got the start. I mean, I'm telling you, Joe Milton, not only did he play pretty well in that game from my memory, but the real takeaway I had, the real thing that I will never forget, is Joe Milton unleashed one of the most impressive throws I've ever seen in the history of football. Not an exaggeration whatsoever. I'm telling you, pro, college, high school, I don't know that I've ever seen a ball thrown farther than that in an actual game, not in a Pro Bowl contest or something. But I literally had to rewind it. It looked like my TV had glitched. Milton had thrown the ball so far. So this was an athletic feat. It was so impressive. I think people are just going, oh, yeah, Milton, he's going to be great. But don't forget that it didn't work out for Joe Milton at the University of Michigan. Maybe Jim Harbaugh deserves some blame there. Maybe the offense is a better fit in Tennessee. Listen, there's lots of arguments for Joe Milton. I'm just trying to tell you it's not a guarantee whatsoever. Plus, I think at the very least, yeah, I'm sure Squirrel White, who is going to now man the slot position for Jalen Hyatt, who's off to the NFL, I'm sure he's an easy bet to have over 1,000 yards receiving. Again, in this Heupel offense, the slot receiver always goes crazy for sure in this offense. But at the same time, will those outside receivers, will they have the same get up and go that they had last year? Because it just seemed like they were able to pick on whichever safety matchup they liked against Missouri last year. You notice it wasn't Ennis Rakestraw or Chris Abrams-Drain who were getting beat against Tennessee last year. At times, they were just able to get some favorable matchups against safeties. And, let's be real, most safeties aren't going to be able to cover a really, really high-quality SEC wide receiver, especially you give the quarterback enough time. So that's going to be a problem for Missouri again this season, or any Tennessee opponent if they are as good on the outside as they were last season. Again, Squirrel White on the inside, I'm sure he'll be fine. Let's look to see if Tennessee can do what they did on the outside. Certainly Milton has the arm to chuck it downfield, but they're going to need more than that at times. And coming up, after all these years, Jeremy Maclin finally admits to the one mistake he made in his entire career. Coming up right after these quick words. Now, there have been a lot of great atmospheres at Faurot Field, Mizzou Arena, the Hearn Center over the years, of course. But to me, the best and most unique atmosphere I've ever experienced as a sports fan is 2007 at Arrowhead Stadium when the Tigers, of course, took on Kansas. Missouri wins at 36-28, ultimately becomes the number one team in the country. Well, those highlights tend to pop up quite frequently online. It did so again the other day, and every time I watch the highlights from that game, I've always been shocked that an opening punt return, I should say an early punt return by Jeremy Maclin, he breaks to the outside, takes it multiple 30, 40, 50 yards downfield, real long downfield, down the sidelines, basically has one man to beat with a blocker between him, and in a very un-Jeremy Maclin-like fashion, doesn't cut it back inside. I've always thought, my God, if he cuts it back inside there, probably scores a touchdown. Just couldn't help but notice that. But I've always thought, easy for me to say, right? Easy for me to say as the guy with the perfect vantage point from the stands. It's easy to do from the Madden cam, but if you're actually in the helmet, that's another deal. But thought it was interesting that another former Tiger and Maclin, Jamori Maclin, also known as Jay Maclin, he tweeted at his cousin and said, "You was supposed to score that punt return, dog," and has some laughing emojis there along with the palm to the face emoji. Jeremy Maclin responds back and says, "I know, man, 99 out of 100 times I cut that back. Have no idea why I didn't that time." And another face palm emoji for Jeremy. And I'll just say, again, easy for us to say from up above, but funny when Jeremy gets that view, he says the same thing to himself, like, wow, why didn't I cut back there? I definitely would have scored. But fortunately, it's just something we can now laugh about, almost 16 years later now. Didn't cost Missouri the game whatsoever, and obviously Jeremy Maclin, a gigantic part of why Missouri had a magical 2007 season. So no hard feelings, Jeremy. Just thought that was a funny moment with you and your cousin Jay. But hey, thanks for joining me on this podcast. Sorry it took me a little bit longer than usual. And by the way, I took about a 3-hour break between the second and third segment there. But with the magic of editing, it was seamless for all of you. So again, thanks for joining me. Thanks for being patient here on this Saturday. If you happen to be listening to it right when it uploads, hey, you can probably check out the basketball tournament with the Show Me squad. Isaiah Mosley, Jonte Porter, Tony Criswell, I believe Matt Pressey, among others. So some interesting Tiger names there to check out on ESPN2 here in about an hour, again at 3 o'clock on ESPN2. So until next time, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked on Mizzou.